Australia's government is simply racketeering in its most basic form. And we pay protection money to these racketeers so that they'll leave us alone. Otherwise, they'll send their thugs in a uniform around to grab us and put us in a cage. And many people can see that this is the way the world is run, but yet they continue to comply with it. And as I've said so often, they do this simply because they live in disunited communities. It's very difficult for one person to stop complying with the system on their own if they do not have the support of their community around them. And many people think, well, it's okay, you should pay your taxes because I pay my taxes, and so therefore you should pay your taxes too. And this is the type of mentality that we're dealing with. It's almost like people thinking, well, it's okay for me to be being beaten over the head as long as everybody else is being beaten over the head as well. It's kind of a weird, bizarre type of logic that we have, but it's understandable because it's what's fed to us via the education system. We're just told that this is the way the world is and this is the way it's always been, and it just has to be that way, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Essentially, it's a form of people farming. As I said, the media never really alerts people to this fact, and the government certainly tie people up with theatres of conflict and theatres of fear to keep them distracted, so they're never going to tell anybody. But people really should figure this out for themselves, and in fact I think many people are beginning to figure this out for themselves now. The problem is that once they do figure it out, they still don't know what direction to go in. They still see government as being something valid and something necessary. Even though it's corrupt, they think, well, all these politicians are criminals, yes, but what would we ever do without them? And that, again, is a very bizarre type of mentality, a type of Stockholm syndrome that people seem to be stuck in. They don't like the system, and they know the system is corrupt, and yet they cannot imagine how their life would possibly function without it. But the reality is, folks, that we really don't need the government here at all. We don't need the system here at all. Well, I guess if we've got some sort of society as such as the cities that we've got, we need some sort of a system of infrastructure to manage them. But the system of government that we've got, we don't really need at all. And the reason the world is in the state that it's in, and the reason nobody really knows anything, is because the media simply make sure that people are kept uninformed. Like I said, even when people do find out the system's corrupt and they find out what's going on, and oh my God, the world is run by criminals, they really don't know what to do about it. So many people simply can't see the bigger picture. They want someone to point the finger at, they want someone to blame. They want to be able to say, oh, it's the Zionists, it's whatever. And sure, like I keep telling you for years, the Zionists have certainly got a major influence over what's going on. But even the people within Zionism, the people that do this, all the people that do all these bad things, they do so because they're programmed to do so. Of course, there are a certain percentage of people who are simply psychopaths and do what psychopaths do. But most of the minions that go along with the plans of these people do so because they're programmed to do so. Most of the people who live their lives in a state of religious division or racial division or social tension of any kind do so because they're programmed to do so. They can't see the bigger picture of what the underlying causes are, which is the government system itself, the fact that all of the problems exist and all of the constraints that hold humanity back exist because they're legislated to exist. If there's something that would improve the world that you're not able to do because you've got to jump through all sorts of hoops and red tape and get approvals and all sorts of stuff, you're just dealing with legislation which is preventing you from moving forward and doing something that would benefit mankind. And that's the problem. And we are kept so misinformed about everything. And really that is the job of the media and the education system. And the job of the government is to basically appease everybody and keep them contained and keep them satisfied and make sure they're all marching in the direction the system wants them to march in. And we've been looking at all of this for a long time and attempting to figure out what's really going on here. And what appears to be happening, folks, as I've alluded to quite often recently, is that our history has been changed, everything has changed, and what we are involved in is an ever-repeating cycle of the creation of civilizations and the destruction of civilizations. And it would appear the main reason for this is due to mining operations that are carried out during the rise and fall of these civilizations. And this may be a strange thing to consider, but there's an awful lot of evidence to back this up. As I've suggested quite often recently, we are living in a very, very different world, a very different type of reality to the reality that we think we are living in. The world that was here not too long ago is a very, very different world to the world that now exists. And there's so much evidence to back this up. So many of the strange monuments and strange artifacts that we've found lying all around the world tell a completely different version of history to the one that we've been told. And not only do they tell a different version of history, but they also suggest a different concept of life and what life is, really what this world is, what magic is, what our powers of manifestation are, really what we once were and what we are really capable of. They lend credence and value to many of the ancient myths that exist, and these myths are incredibly interesting because you find there are common myths that exist in all cultures from all different parts of the world that are apparently not supposed to have had contact with each other, and yet they all talk of similar tales. And it goes a long way to validating these myths and demonstrating what type of a reality we once had, what this world once was, and indeed how locked down and how blinded we have become. The closing down of the pineal gland and the things that are done to us to limit human potential, the fact that we're told that 98% of our DNA is junk, which is completely and utterly ridiculous, it just shows that 98% of what we should be doing, we are incapable of doing. 98% of our potential has been reduced. 98% of who we are is missing. Well, it's unknown to us anyway. That's what junk DNA is, folks. It's not junk. It's the stuff that gives you access to what exists outside what you know as reality, which is a very, very small part of reality. Think about it. If 98% of your DNA is shut down, then 98% of your access to reality is shut down, so you're experiencing about 2% of what you really should be experiencing. And you have access to 2% of your capabilities due to something that happened that shut us down. What was that? What happened? And what happened as a result of this shutdown? What else did we lose access to? Not just our higher senses and not just the world around us, but could this also explain why things that appear to be mysteries to us are such mysteries? Because if we have not got access to 98% of our capabilities, then that would certainly explain a lot of things. A few shows ago, I was talking about the paintings of Leonardo da Vinci, for example, how these paintings are actually impossible to paint because of the medium that they're painted on and the way they're painted. The fact that the paint on Leonardo da Vinci's paintings is only 2 microns thick. With the amount of shading that you've got on these paintings to produce the textures that you've got, there's no way to do this and apply that many colors and result in a thickness of only 2 microns. We can't even laser print that many colors in 2 microns. And this is a great mystery as to how these paintings were done. It appears to be done by a technology that we don't have access to. But what if that technology exists within ourselves? Because what we don't have access to is 98% of who and what we are. So again, the question becomes, what was the event that caused this to happen? And why isn't this being looked into? Why isn't this part of the human experience ever really discussed by people? Why is it never discussed by academia, by scientists, by government, or by any of the sources that we look to for authority or advice? It's not even acknowledged by them, let alone discussed by them. All that is discussed by these people is economic standards and economic values and what we can do to improve the economy and how much we need to tighten our belts and austerity and how we all need to go into a state of scarcity to pull the country forward so we can be the best country in comparison to all the other countries, and all the countries are told the same thing. And there's nothing about the human experience ever discussed at all, not outside humanity's economic worth anyway, and that should be a little bit of a sign for people. The systems of control that are here to curtail the human experience are so vast and so all-encompassing that people really can't see it. They can't see the bigger web. That's where they need someone to point the finger at. They need someone within the web to say, you're the one who spun the web, you're the one we can blame. But then they never suggest what we should do after we've blamed this person. Okay, so what are we going to do? We'll name the Zionists as the ones who create all these problems, and okay, we'll remove the Zionists, and now what? Will the world suddenly turn normal? No, of course it won't, because the system is still there, and it's our belief in the system that is the problem. You know, if we were to have united communities, as I've said so often, if you had the strength of numbers around you to simply walk away from the system would cease to function. You know, government only exists because we choose to give government our authority. We do so because we get knocked on the head if we don't, because we live in disunited communities, because if we stand up against the government, the people around us aren't going to stand up with us. They're just going to watch you get knocked on the head and say, well, isn't he silly? He shouldn't have done that. They don't see that all the problems they face come from the same source, and this entire thing is fiction. This entire system is fiction. It's just an idea. It's just an idea that someone put in place that we all agreed to go along with. And for the most part, we didn't even know we were doing it. We were just told that the system is real, and we were told that this is the way it is. This is what the education system is all about. It's to train you that the system is real and to instill within you this belief in authority. And we don't question it. But ultimately, it's just an idea. People have ideas, folks, and the system is just an idea. You know, some of these ideas can be good and some of them can be bad, but the idea of the system, the idea of government, has long since ceased to serve the people. Now, if it ever did serve the people, I don't think that was ever its purpose. I think the purpose of government has been to control the people right from the very beginning, to feed them a false reality, to keep them corralled within this people farm, to keep them appeased, to give them all sorts of stuff to entertain themselves with so they don't really notice the servitude they're living in. But I don't think it really serves any purpose at all, and I don't think we need it. I think the real problem is whatever happened to shut us down. So limited in our potential, we were so limited in our view of what reality is. In fact, I think there's so much going on around us that were people suddenly to find their whole senses come online, their high senses come online, and all of reality was made visible to them, and they were made aware of everything around them, they would probably think themselves completely and utterly insane. But the problem is, as I said, that no one can see the bigger web. No one is even prepared to really acknowledge its existence. And even within the resistance, there's too many people who just want to be gurus, want to be the leader, want to be the one who's got all the answers and shout down everybody else and snap and accuse anybody who disagrees with them, divide and conquer. It's a complete schmozzle. I mean, it certainly has a lot of potential, but in its current form and with its current direction and the current attitude of many people within it, there's no freedom to be found in the resistance, because the resistance can't even step back from itself, generally, and look at the bigger picture, or even acknowledge that there may be a bigger picture. Too many people within the resistance have locked themselves into belief systems, or they want someone to blame. And sure, there's a lot of people to blame. There's a lot of people, a lot of mechanisms, a lot of institutions that we can point the finger at. All of them are corrupt. All of them can be held to blame in some way. But again, if we remove all of them, then what? Because if people are still not in contact with who and what they are, where will the world go from that point? And if people were to regain this connection to who and what they are, then there's nothing else they have to do. Because once you get that connection, you can see just how easy it would be to step away from the system.